I do think the live virtual movement is a very important development, but there's only one reality, and that's our lived reality as social human beings. I think it's very important to kind of frame this debate, and I do see virtuality as a tool that serves real human reality. I was trying to think, well, what does define human reality? You know, what is the, what are we benchmarking virtual reality against? And what's the origins of consciousness? What are we human beings? And I have kind of three ideas I want to put on the table, and then I want to look at various dimensions of virtual reality through that prism. One, I think human beings have an innate drive for sociability and belonging, and that's been fundamental to human evolution. Secondly, human beings have a predisposition to fairness, which creates vital bonds of trust. And thirdly, there is an absolutely primeval urge by humans to make the world better. And our consciousness is rooted, in my view, in those three pillars. And virtual reality can't steal it, reproduce it, or threaten it. It can greatly enhance it. So I thought I would just try to kind of send a word or two about each of those three things and then try and apply them. On sociability, I mean, we should be very, very aware that the development of language was one of the keys to early human survival as hunter-gatherers. And the development of the linguistic capacity and development of it was part of the natural selection process. The better a group could talk to each other and develop words and symbols, the better it could organize to hunt, kill, to store and associate. So conversation was the foundation of association. And of course, there was a feedback loop, which is obvious when we look at the way human beings developed. And words allowed us not just to associate, but to think, to conceptualize. It opened synapses in our brain, which made us cleverer. So you look at kind of, kind of apes transitioning to men and women, small brains. The brains get larger as synapses get opened up. And you can see the effect on infants today. The more stimulus, the bigger their brains and the faster development of their motor skills. So, I mean, I do think there is an argument to make that the development of virtual reality, which is taking communications a step further, it will intensify our communicative capacity, our interactivity, will enlarge our brain capacity, and also our chance to express emotion. But of course, at the same token, it may intensify less desirable dimensions, addiction, depression, binging, obsessing, and all things that concern people when they talk about virtual reality. Secondly, a pillar of what it means to be human, I call it the proportionality gene, that everywhere in all cultures, justice is reflected by a pair of scales where the intensity of the punishment reflects the intensity of the crime. Now, of course, all civilizations know there's luck, but that is it's a fundamental kind of element in kind of human association. We don't like cheats who try to kind of get disproportionately more by cheating. And we've developed all kinds of signals, eye contact in particular, handshakes is another. I don't know if anyone watches Larry David in Curb Your Enthusiasm, but it's one of the funniest scenes when he tries to have eye contact with somebody he's not quite sure he trusts. He holds eye contact for 15 seconds, 30 seconds, until you're rolling about with laughter. But the underlying message is very clear. I'm going to stare you down to see if I can trust you. Of course, the original idea of the web was it would be a democratized, kind of trusted form of kind of intermediation, interconnectedness. Of course, lost that. That's why Tim Berners-Lee is so anxious to develop a new decentralized web in which we can own our information. But do think fairness alongside the need for sociability as elements, fundamental pillars in humanity. And lastly, innovation. I mean, the point of being alive is to be happy, And we've asked questions about what drives happiness since the beginning of time. But the most satisfactory definition was that provided by Aristotle, that it's about acting on the world to make it a bit better. It's an innate drive. We can't stop it. And actually, given the technologies of virtual reality, we are, whether it's virtual sex or whether it's a better version of Zoom, we will use technology to try to augment our lives and make the world a bit better. So if you kind of look at, some of the developments of virtual reality through those three pillars, I find it quite a useful way of kind of thinking about it. I mean, the growth of Zoom and all the techniques for kind of online work, I mean, they served a crucial human need. Social interaction in a pandemic, of course they took off. They were economic in time. They can include everyone, although I'm aware of the, they can be tyrannous, but nonetheless, they are inclusive and they're efficient in terms of the management of the business. And I think that certainly in a lot of companies that I've talked to, I interviewed for the Purposeful company, 14 leaders of purposeful organizations, and they were all very, very keen to get over to me that during the life of the pandemic, the use of Zoom and virtual reality was a very important way of staving off kind of mental instability and mental illness of workforces. And it's interesting that the Samaritans have taken to Zoom really aggressively, and they really think that the use of Zoom rather than just telephone calls has actually helped to lower suicide rates. So, that's to the good. That's virtual reality enhancing sociability. But of course, there's the other problem. The downsides is that actually sometimes you can't do the social virtually. There is the spontaneous, there is the serendipitous that actually, you do that. Actually, these kind of disciplined one-dimensional frameworks don't really capture. I mean, eye contact and body language matter in a meeting. If you're floating an idea and you can't see how the others are reacting to it, you become much more tentative about whether you're going to kind of do it on Zoom when you can't get that feedback and know whether to draw back or to carry on with it. And I do think that the future of the workplace is going to be blended, a combination of the live, of the kind of virtual reality, if you like, and real reality. And there's other downsides about sociability, which we've really got to guard against. I've been very struck. I know some people who've been teaching at both college and at school, where there's been very big problems with young sixth formers really treating the young women as if they were virtual reality women and could be treated in a very transactional way, assuming that they're always ready for sex and they're very sexualized beings as they are on VR. And that's created a real crisis, a kind of in some private school sixth forms with mixed men and women. And of course, it turns out to be a kind of a larger problem too across a lot of areas where kind of adolescent men and adolescent women are kind of cheek by jowl. And I mean, I think it really has created, that's a dimension of sociability that VR is actually turning to the worst. And there's gambling. I mean, some of these online casinos are now, these virtual reality casinos are extraordinary if you've been in one. I mean, essentially, you're in a casino. And betting volumes are exploding. I mean, they've multiplied more than 25 times in the last 2 years. And it poses real problems about people who are, if they're obsessive, what does one do about that? And again, one has to kind of translate into the virtual world what you do in the real world. I mean, that we have to have circuit breakers kind of in the way that VR casinos are used. And we also need, and I'll say a little bit of this at the very end, we have to get the companies that provide these services to really take their responsibilities to their users fundamentally seriously and not transactionally as prey to be on which they can act as predators. On fairness, my second of my pillars, I think that virtual reality can make cheating easier. And it's interesting that kind of many of the successful VR platforms have kind of gone beyond what kind of Uber do and Deliveroo, and actually trying to really embed, feedback and scoring systems so that actually users can feed back to the provider of the VR service whether or not they are being cheated. And cheating undermines trust, and trust is a fundamental pillar of human sociability. So again, this is going to be profoundly guarded against. One has to be careful that you don't go down the Chinese kind of social credit system, having kind of universal one kind of the state centrally policing it, because I do think that opens the way to very serious forms of social control through virtual reality. And the way the social credit system in China is developing, so they're intruding into kind of virtual reality as well as kind of, are you behaving in the virtual world as well as you should be in the real world? I mean, goodness me. I mean, this is Orwellian thought control 4.0. We've got to have decentralized kind of systems of kind of feedback and scoring, and that actually permit users to trust the virtual reality system they're using. And lastly, innovation. I mean, I do think that virtual reality is opening up the most fantastic opportunities for innovation, because you can actually model what your idea might be and stress test it without having to spend a lot of money. And I've been with entrepreneurs who've stress tested, for example, the intensive use of agriculture in high-rise blocks, turning high-rise blocks into fields where you grow kind of high value-added kind of plants. I'm on the board of the Satellite Applications Catapult, and we have virtual reality systems to allow people to simulate what's going on in space if they want to manufacture in space. Rolls-Royce use virtual reality to build their engines, the next generation of engines, and stress test them. And you can stress test construction. I don't think the cladding disaster would have happened if one had stress tested kind of Grenfell Tower kind of virtually before actually building it. So I think these are all kind of superb dimensions. And Brigitte was laughing, saying about applying your makeup in virtual reality, but actually one of the things that I've just left Oxford, where I've been for 9 years running a college, and the transition to online teaching and virtual reality lectures has been really spectacularly successful. And it's permitted a new form of hybrid teaching to open up, where actually you can go to the best lecturers and best classes, where someone is kind of really good at that kind of in which it's teaching as transmission. But where teaching is about interactivity, the tutorial system, different people are often better at that in smaller class sizes. And what you're watching is a kind of reinvention of higher education. So, I mean, I do think that in terms of innovation, the virtual movement are really opening up, fabulous possibilities over the next generation. And I think the pace of innovation will accelerate. But just to finish off, this must have been obvious whilst I've been speaking, that whether you're a provider of education, whether you're a provider, if you're going to be a virtual reality company kind of specializing in simulating aero engines or what's happening in space, it's really vital that that is your fundamental purpose, and that you don't use the possibilities of virtual reality to cheat and to offend, if you like, those three principles of my view, what it means to be human: sociability, fairness and trust, and innovation. And of course, the temptation in the casino world, the temptation in the pornography world is to do just that, is to kind of really use the people who are on your system kind of as nothing more but notations on a spreadsheet and exploit them mercilessly. And so I'm a powerful advocate for organizations actually having to incorporate around a declared purpose, to be held to account for that purpose, which must be about promoting human betterment, reporting on it systematically, and being held account for not delivering it. And I noticed with interest that Nanopore, a startup, has actually organized its constitution so it's going to have the voting rights, disproportionate voting rights, to protect the founding purpose of its founders. Birgitte and I both know him, Professor Hagan Bailey. So this will be one of the few high-tech companies that won't get taken over, and whose essential kind of mission, which is related to virtual reality, in being able to provide kind of high instantaneous, near instantaneous diagnosis of your entire kind of gene structure, and thus what kinds of how your body will respond to certain drugs and treatments, all being done virtually. They're going to protect their business model and protect their purpose by the way they're constituted. And that is a model, I think, for the way we're going to have to manage the stresses and tensions of the years ahead. So we can be more social, we can be fairer, and we can be more innovative with virtual reality. There are obvious threats and abuses. They can be countered. But if we can construct a world in which the real organizations that are managing virtual life commit to a higher purpose, then this development can be to the advantage of all of us. Thank you.